The sky cracked open without warning. It wasn't the kind of storm that crept in slow, giving people time to shut windows or gather laundry off the line. It hit fast. Violent wind, sideways rain, thunder that rolled through the hills like it was hunting something. Gabe stood in the middle of his garage, hands wrapped around a wrench he hadn't used in over an hour, watching as the rain hammered the gravel outside like it was trying to wash the town clean. The power had flickered twice already. He didn't trust it to hold. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The garage smelled like oil, rust, and a little bit of regret. 2 trucks sat half-gutted in the bays, both overdue, both unpaid for. He told himself it didn't matter, told himself the rain would pass, the power would hold, the bills could wait. Same lies as always. Then he saw the lights, a flash of white cutting through the sheets of water, not headlights, brake lights, red and blinking, hesitant. A car crawled into view just past the edge of his property line, sleek and low to the ground, completely out of place on this stretch of forgotten road. It rolled forward, sputtered, then stopped altogether, hazards pulsing against the storm like a heartbeat. He moved without thinking, wrench dropped to the floor, boots heavy on wet cement. By the time he reached the door, the driver's side opened. She stepped out. No umbrella, no jacket thick enough to matter. Just a thin, soaked coat clinging to her frame, and hair plastered to her face. She stood there, dazed, one hand braced on the car like it might steady her. He watched her for a second too long. She looked up, their eyes locked through the downpour, hers sharp, scanning, like she was still deciding whether he was a threat or a lifeline. The wind caught the door and slammed it back with a metallic thud. He stepped forward, hand raised, not in greeting, just in offering. "You can wait it out inside," he said, voice raised over the thunder. She hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, the storm brought her to his door. The door groaned on its hinges as he pushed it open, the warm, metallic scent of old oil and rain-damp rubber rushing to meet them. She stepped in slow, like she wasn't sure she should, like the concrete floor might give way beneath her boots. Gabe reached back, slammed the door shut against the wind, and the sound of the storm dulled to a low, distant growl behind the walls. She didn't speak, just stood there, dripping, hair dark and tangled, lashes spiked with rain, arms crossed tight like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside in. Her jacket was soaked clean through, the thin fabric clinging to her collarbones, sleeves dripping onto the floor with soft, rhythmic taps. There was mud on her boots. Designer, he noticed, though scuffed like they'd walked farther than they were built for. He didn't ask questions, just walked past her, toward the tiny corner kitchenette, flicked the switch on the old coffee maker out of habit, even though the pot hadn't been cleaned in days. Poured what was left into a cracked ceramic mug, still warm, barely. When he handed it to her, she didn't thank him, just took it with both hands, like it was heavier than it looked, and held it under her nose for a moment, steam curling toward her face. She smelled like cedar, rain, and something sharper underneath, city perfume gone faint, like it had run out of excuses. He leaned back against the counter, arms folded, watching her through the silence. She was still standing, hadn't moved past the door, hadn't even taken a sip. The air between them was thick, heavy with everything unsaid. He cleared his throat once. "You got a name?" he asked, not unkind. She blinked, slow, like it took effort to come back to the room. Then finally, soft, clipped, practiced, "Alex." That was it. No last name, no explanation, no apology for showing up at his door in a storm with a car that didn't belong to the road or the town it stalled in. Just Alex. And somehow, that said more than enough. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Gabe stepped back outside. The sky still hung low, bruised and moody, like it hadn't quite finished deciding whether to let go or hold back. Alex stayed inside the garage, silent but watching, one hand wrapped around the chipped mug, like it might anchor her. Her car was the kind you didn't see out here. Black, low to the ground, matte finish that didn't shine. It absorbed the light. Sleek curves, smooth edges, the kind of machine that looked more at home, weaving through city traffic than coughing its last breath on a cracked rural road. Gabe crouched beside it, ran his hand along the fender, eyes narrowing as the details settled in. There were no emblems, no standard trim, just the subtle edge of custom paneling and a barely visible seam near the headlight that told him this thing had been built different. Under the hood, it got worse, or better, depending on how you looked at it. He whistled low through his teeth. Well, hell. Proprietary hybrid rig, not the kind in production yet. This was pre-production, maybe even pre-approval. The kind of tech whispered about in the circles Gabe hadn't run with in a decade, the kind with closed source code and drive systems no small town shop had the tools to even scan, let alone repair. It was bleeding coolant from a pressure split near the battery mount, a fault that didn't just happen, it got pushed into failure. Gabe leaned back, wiped his hands on a rag that didn't help much. His gut twisted, not from the work, but from what the hell this kind of car was doing here, with a woman like her behind the wheel, in a town where nothing like this belonged. He stood slowly, turned toward the garage. She was still watching. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, not bothering to sugarcoat it. She didn't blink. "Does it matter?" "It does if you want it fixed." A pause, then, "I'm not looking for fixed." He frowned. "What are you looking for, then?" She hesitated. Rain dripped from the edge of the garage roof, ticking soft against the gravel. Her eyes met his, clear and unreadable. "Somewhere. It won't matter that it's broken." The motel lights flickered once, then went dark. Gabe stood at the front counter, arms crossed, listening as the manager gave the same apology for the third time, like repetition might make it sound truer. "Storm knocked out the last unit's heat. Pipes froze last winter, never got fixed right. I can't put her in there, man. Sorry." The guy didn't even glance at Alex, just jabbed a thumb toward the parking lot, like that was enough. Decision made. Nothing personal. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, soft but bone-deep cold, the kind that crept in and stayed, no matter how many layers you wore. Gabe looked at her, still standing beside the car, arms folded, hair clinging to her cheeks like ivy. She didn't flinch, didn't complain, just nodded once, like she was already used to doors closing. They got back in his truck, neither of them speaking. Gravel cracked beneath the tires as they turned down Main, headlights slicing through the dark like it might unravel something. When he pulled into the lot behind the garage, she didn't move to get out, just sat there, fingers curled tight in her lap. He left the engine running and stepped out first, opened the passenger door, let the warm spill of the cab hit the cold air between them. "There's a cot," he said. "Back office. It's not much." She looked at him for a long beat, like she was waiting for the rest, the condition, the ask, the catch. But it didn't come. Just him, standing there with his hands in his pockets, already walking toward the side door before she said yes. She followed. The office was small, more supply room than resting place, a battered metal desk, file drawers that stuck, and a narrow cot shoved between a shelf of old manuals and the back wall. It smelled like paper, rust, and sawdust, but it was warm and dry. He flicked on the space heater, nodded at the folded blanket on the end. "Bathrooms through there. Lock sticks, but it works." She stood in the doorway unmoving, then, softly, "You don't even know me." Gabe turned, hand on the door. "You're soaked, it's midnight, and there's nowhere else. That's all I need to know tonight." She didn't thank him, but she stepped inside. And that was enough. The town didn't die all at once, it just stopped waking up. Storefronts still wore names, but the lights behind them had long since gone dark. Sun-bleached flyers curled in the windows. Grand opening signs faded into irony. Once there'd been a bakery with the kind of bread you could smell 3 blocks away. A movie house where kids lined up every Friday night. Now it was just a string of hollow buildings along a two-lane road no one had a reason to follow anymore. At the corner of Main and Hollow Creek, the stoplight blinked red into an intersection no one used. It hadn't worked properly in years, but no one bothered to fix it. Not because they didn't care, because they'd stopped expecting traffic. There were still people, sure. You'd see them at Luann's, the only cafe still hanging on, serving watery coffee and the kind of eggs that came out of cartons. You'd find them hunched over booths, talking in half-whispers about weather, prices, and how things used to be when there was something to stay for. No one talked about the factory anymore. It had been 10 years since the machines went quiet and the paychecks stopped. A decade of boarded-up houses and rusted swing sets in overgrown yards. Gabe's garage sat at the edge of it all, a squat building with peeling paint and a roof that leaked when the wind came from the south. The kind of place that didn't look open until you saw the light behind the dirty windows or heard the slow churn of a socket wrench echo through the bay doors. He kept it alive because it was all he had. One man, a dog too old to bark, and a reputation for fixing things that probably weren't worth fixing. He didn't dream big, not anymore. He worked with what he had. Old engines, rusted frames, the occasional truck from someone just stubborn enough to hang on. The shop never made him rich. Hell, it barely paid the heating bill. But it stayed open, even when everything else didn't. And in a town that forgot how to hope, sometimes staying open was the closest thing left to belief. The wrench slipped, knuckles scraping hard against the frame. Gabe hissed, shook his hand, watched the blood bead across his skin. He didn't cuss, not anymore. Pain was just part of the rhythm now. He wiped it on a rag already dark with oil and slid back under the truck. "You still think that truck's worth saving?" a voice called out from the open bay door. He didn't have to look. That voice only came from one place. "Depends who's asking," he muttered. Cassie stepped into the garage like she still owned it, even though she hadn't worked there in years. Ball cap pulled low, jeans dusted in red clay, she still looked like the girl who could outrun anyone on the dirt track by the old quarry. Same sharp grin, same eyes that never missed a thing. "You patching it up or pretending to?" she asked, leaning against the workbench. "Doing what I can with what I've got." "That why you're still here?" Her tone was casual, but it cut. Gabe slid out from under the truck, sat up slowly, and reached for the thermos by his foot. The coffee was cold, but he drank it anyway. "What do you want, Cass?" "Nothing," she said, "just checking on the ghost." He raised an eyebrow. "You?" she added softer now. "You used to chase things. Now you fix things that can't be fixed." He didn't answer right away. Just looked around the garage, at the cracked cement, the wall of old tools, the photograph tacked above the desk. A younger version of himself, helmet in hand, arms slung around their dad. Behind them the track shimmered in heat haze and hope. "I was supposed to be someone," he said finally. "Races, contracts, engines that sang when you touched them right." "You were someone," Cassie said. "You just burned too hot." He swallowed hard. "I had the chance. Vegas, full ride, sponsors lined up. Then Dad got sick." He nodded. "And I stayed." She didn't argue, didn't say what others had, that he gave up too soon, that dreams could wait. They both knew better. He stayed because someone had to, because this town, this garage, this crumbling piece of inheritance, none of it could carry itself. And maybe part of him still hoped that something worth chasing might come back through the door. The morning light crept in through the garage windows, dust floating through it like tired ghosts. Gabe was already deep into the engine of an old Chevy. Sleeves rolled past his elbows, grease streaked along his forearms like scars earned instead of wiped away. He didn't speak, didn't notice her standing in the doorway at first. He was like that when he worked, quiet, focused, every movement purposeful. Alex stood with her arms crossed, sipping from a fresh mug of black coffee he'd left on the counter. She hadn't asked for it, and he hadn't said a word when he poured it. just slid the cup her way like it was part of the morning routine now. She wasn't used to watching people, not like this, not without angles, not without wanting something, but Gabe was different. The way his hands moved carefully, like he was touching something alive. The way he talked to the engine under his breath, murmuring like he was coaxing it back to life instead of fixing it. There was patience in his movements, but also a kind of discipline that came from long, slow disappointment. She noticed the way he wiped tools clean before setting them down, the way he double-checked a bolt even after tightening it, the way he glanced toward the street every few minutes, not expecting anyone, just making sure the world hadn't fallen apart while he worked. When he finally looked up and caught her staring, he didn't ask why, just nodded toward the truck and said, "She's got a good heart, just been running on the wrong kind of fuel." Alex tilted her head. The truck? His gaze held hers for a moment too long. "Yeah," he said quietly. "The truck." She didn't push, just walked slowly to the edge of the bay, leaned against the frame, and watched him go back to work. But her grip on the coffee mug tightened slightly, not from the cold, not from discomfort, because in that moment, under the hum of old engines and the warmth of something starting to stir, she realized she wasn't just watching him. She was wondering what it would feel like to be rebuilt by hands that careful. The rain had moved on, leaving behind puddles that mirrored the gray sky and streets still too empty for the hour. Inside the garage, the heater hummed low, struggling to shake off the cold that had settled in the concrete. Gabe was bent over a carburetor at the back workbench, sorting through gaskets and tools by muscle memory, alone. Alex sat at the small table near the office, her laptop open, fingers moving fast and quiet. She hadn't said where the power was coming from, just asked for an outlet, and didn't wait for permission. He'd pointed, half curious, half distracted. The screen glowed against her face, and the storm-swollen light outside gave her a kind of sharpness. She looked like someone born to command stillness, or maybe just trained to hide what she didn't want people to see. Gabe glanced over, wiping his hands on a rag. That's when he saw it, barely visible, etched into the corner of the laptop in brushed steel. AVH. 3 letters. Elegant. Deliberate. He paused mid-step, frown tugging at the edge of his mouth. A VH? The initials rang like a dropped wrench, faint but undeniable. He'd seen them before, years ago, maybe more. Not on a computer, but in a headline, a photo. A woman shaking hands with men in suits beside the hood of a prototype electric coupe. Not just any prototype, the one that had nearly upended the entire industry before it disappeared behind litigation and silence. Alex Von Hale, CEO visionary. The one they said moved too fast, pushed too hard, didn't wait for the world to catch up. She vanished from the press just as fast as she rose in it. And now she was here, in his garage, wearing someone else's silence. He didn't say her name, didn't let the recognition show on his face. Just turned back to his work and twisted a bolt too tight. But the question sat there in his chest like a ticking valve. If she was who he thought she was, what the hell was she running from? And more important, why did it feel like the answer might already be tied to him? Her phone buzzed again, sharp, persistent, the kind of vibration that traveled up the metal table and into her bones. Alex didn't move. She just stared out the narrow garage window, watching fog lift from the trees beyond the town line, like smoke rising from something no one bothered to put out. The phone kept going. 5 missed calls, then 8, then 13. She flipped it over, screen down, like that would quiet it. It didn't. The silence that followed was louder than the buzzing had been. She pressed her thumb to the bridge of her nose, closed her eyes, and took a breath like she was bracing for a wave that never came. The calls were from Rena, her assistant, her shadow, the one person who'd stayed when everyone else had pulled out or turned. The fact that Rena was calling meant something had gone sideways, or worse, exactly as predicted. She knew what the message would say: board meeting, emergency vote. The patents, hers, all hers, were probably being dragged into arbitration without her consent. Her name would be on the documents, but not in the room. Her vision, rewritten by men who hadn't even built the engine she sketched on a napkin at 2 a.m. 2 years ago. Alex didn't move. Not toward the phone, not toward the door. She just sat there, spine tight, lips pressed together like she might shatter if she let anything out. The walls of the garage were too quiet, too solid. The kind of quiet that made you think about choices you didn't want to own. She had built a company out of breath and steel and nights where she didn't sleep. She'd fought for every inch of that boardroom table. But now, somewhere between losing control and losing herself, she'd ended up here, hiding behind the hum of old engines and the smell of motor oil. She looked at the phone one more time, then turned it off completely. Some storms you could outrun, others you let hit and hoped there'd be something left of you on the other side. This one? She didn't know yet which it would be, but she wasn't ready to answer it, not tonight, not here. The boardroom was glass and steel and silence, the kind that carried weight. No one spoke when Alex entered. They never did. She moved like the room already belonged to her. Black heels, sharp-cut blazer, hair pulled back so clean it looked sculpted. In her hand, a tablet lit with schematics and a heat signature trail from a concept engine still in its infancy. The design bore her name. The risk did too. At the head of the table sat the men who signed checks but didn't know how to build the thing their signatures funded. She didn't mind. Let them think they ran it. She knew better. "Let's begin," she said, voice calm, clipped, and practiced. A slideshow flickered to life behind her. Graphs, numbers, projections that didn't just hint. They promised. A proprietary drivetrain that could reduce emissions by 70% without sacrificing performance. An energy recapture system that made everything on the road today look like it had come out of a junkyard. And tucked at the very end, a frame, the car she sketched on the floor of her apartment after 3 straight nights with no sleep. Sleek, stunning, already alive in her mind. One of the directors leaned forward, Monroe, always Monroe. "Looks good on paper," he said. "But can it be real? Scalable?" Alex didn't flinch. "It already is." A beat. Then she clicked the next slide. A prototype, matte black, no emblems, cutting through the track on a closed course, silent, efficient, perfect. The room shifted. Heads leaned in. Pens moved. Monroe crossed his arms. "How soon before it's public?" "We're not rushing this, not for headlines." She turned, locked eyes. "I built this to last, not impress." They didn't applaud. They never did. But no one challenged her again. She left the room with her chin high, her pace even. People stepped aside in the hallway. A junior analyst dropped her tablet trying to stand too fast when Alex passed. At her office door, her name was etched in glass. V. Hale, Chief Executive Officer. She stood there a second, looking at the reflection in the nameplate. Strong, unyielding. Then the phone in her hand buzzed. A text from Rena. "They're coming for your seat." The empire she'd built had never been safe. She just hadn't expected the knives to come from inside. It started with silence, the kind that follows just after impact, when everything is still standing. But you know, deep down, it won't be for long. Alex sat alone in her office, blinds half drawn, the city spread out below her like a lie she used to believe in. The skyline pulsed with blinking lights and motionless cranes. Across the glass conference room, the board had just finished their vote. Clean, efficient, cold. They didn't call it a takeover. They called it restructuring, a strategic pivot. But the language didn't soften the blow. Not when the faces sitting across from her were the same ones who'd toasted her 5-year projection last spring, all teeth and clinking glasses. Not when Monroe, calm as ever, slid a document across the table and said, "You'll still retain equity. This is just about leadership moving forward." Leadership. She'd bled for it, missed funerals for it, sketched ideas on napkins during red-eye flights, and rewired prototypes with trembling fingers at 3 a.m. while the rest of the city slept. And now they wanted her out, quietly, smoothly, like they could lift her name off the letterhead and no one would notice. She hadn't raised her voice. She didn't throw anything. She'd just leaned back in the chair she picked out herself 5 years ago and said, no. They voted anyway. When the meeting ended, she packed nothing, left the office the way a fire leaves a building, intact from the outside, unlivable inside. By the time Rena caught up with her outside, breathless and panicked, Alex had already pulled her coat tight and hit the sidewalk. "Alex," Rena said, eyes wide, "where are you going?" She didn't stop walking. "Somewhere they won't follow." "Your phone. Monroe's already." "I know." Her voice was steady, but something in it cracked. Let them have their empire. Let them have the press release, the patents. Rena touched her arm. "You built this." Alex turned. "And now I'll build something else." That night she drove until the skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror, until the roads turned narrow and cracked, and the only light came from a garage that still flickered open when no one else bothered to. The smell hit her first, hot metal, scorched oil, something vaguely sweet beneath it, like rubber warmed just past its limit. Alex stepped deeper into the garage, drawn by the low hum of something alive. Gabe wasn't in sight, but his presence was everywhere. Grease-streaked tools lined up with obsessive precision, bolts and bearings sorted in rusted coffee tins, blue tape scrawled with notes in blocky handwriting. She didn't mean to snoop, but she didn't mean to stay either. And here she was, barefoot on cold cement, pulled toward the open bay where something unfamiliar caught the light. At first glance it looked like a mess of parts, but then her eyes adjusted, saw the symmetry, the intention. It was a stripped-down engine, part diesel, part electric, part something else entirely. Built from pieces that weren't meant to speak the same language, but did now, connected by custom welds and repurposed mounts. The cooling system was rigged through copper piping that shimmered like sculpture. A converted battery pack sat snug where the air filter used to be. She circled it slowly, the way one might circle a wild animal, cautious, in awe. She crouched beside it, fingers hovering above the casing. It wasn't a prototype. It wasn't lab-designed or code-wrapped. This thing had been built with hands that understood tension by feel, not algorithm. It ran on instinct, on failure learned the hard way. No stickers, no branding, just raw innovation carved from necessity. "You're not supposed to be back here." Gabe's voice came from behind her, low, not angry, just tired. She didn't flinch. "You built this?" He stepped into view, wiping his hands on a rag that had long since given up. Piece by piece. She stood, eyes still on the engine. "You realize what this is?" Gabe shrugged. "Patch job. Makes the farm trucks last longer." "No." She turned to him, eyes sharp now. This is a hybrid system with a recirculating torque cycle. You've repurposed waste output into kinetic stabilization. I haven't seen this outside a white paper, and yours works." He said nothing. But for the first time since she arrived, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. And the smallest, most dangerous thing of all, possibility. He found her out by the edge of the lot, standing beneath the rusted awning where the vending machine used to be. The sky was streaked in orange and gray, the kind of color that never stayed long, too fleeting, too honest. She had one foot up on the concrete block, arms folded, staring at the empty horizon like it might finally answer something. Gabe didn't call her name, just walked up slow, boots crunching gravel, the silence between them already holding more weight than most conversations. "You're not here for the car," he said. She didn't look at him, just let out a long, tired breath. "No." "You're Alex Vaughn Hale." This time she flinched, barely. A shift in her shoulders, a tightness in her jaw. "Took you long enough." "You run a billion-dollar tech company." "Ran," she corrected, voice sharp but not defensive. They don't let you keep the keys when you stop following the map. He crossed his arms, watching her. Why this town? Why my shop? She finally turned, eyes locking with his. No makeup now, no steel in her expression, just something raw, worn, because it's the last place they'd think to look. They? She laughed once, flat, joyless. Monroe, the board, every bloodless suit who smiled at my face and sharpened knives behind it. He waited, let her fill the quiet if she wanted, if she could. I built something that worked, she said. Too well, apparently. They didn't like that I didn't wait, that I didn't let them slow me down, so they voted me out, quiet, polished, said it was a leadership shift. And you just left? No. Her voice cracked there. I ran. They stood there a while, the wind brushing through the weeds along the fence line, her hair tangled at her cheek. She didn't fix it. Gabe looked at her, not like a stranger anymore, not like the woman who'd stepped into his storm 2 nights ago, but like someone carrying pieces of herself she hadn't figured out how to put down yet. You hiding? He asked finally. She shook her head. I came here to breathe. And if they find you? She looked at him, steady. Then I stopped running. The garage was quiet except for the slow tick of cooling metal and the buzz of an old fluorescent bulb that hadn't decided whether to live or die. Gabe was on the floor, back against the tool chest, legs stretched out, rag in one hand, sweat drying on his neck. The day had been long, the kind that started heavy and refused to lighten. Alex sat across from him on an overturned crate, one foot tapping restlessly, a smudge of grease on her wrist she hadn't noticed yet. She watched him wipe down a socket wrench like it was the only thing left in the world that made sense. I've been thinking, she said, voice even, but edged with something new. That sounds dangerous, he muttered, not looking up. She ignored the jab. You've built something here. That engine. What you did with that hybrid system, it's light years ahead of what they're chasing in labs with million-dollar budgets. You've got real innovation, Gabe. You just never put a name on it. He set the wrench down, finally looked at her. I fix trucks, and tractors, and every rusted-out relic in this town that no one else will touch. I'm not looking to change the world. But what if you already have? She asked. You just buried it under oil and quiet mornings? He let out a laugh, short, flat. You don't know this place. You don't know me. I know you built something no one else dared to try. I know what it's like to put everything you have into something and watch the world shrug at it. He shook his head, pushed himself up slowly, stretching the stiffness out of his back. You want a partnership? He asked, tone dry. What does that even look like? Blueprints, development, scale, she said, standing now too. You build, I protect it. We go small, smart, quiet. He let the silence stretch, staring at her like she'd spoken in a language he hadn't used in years. Then, I build engines, he said, voice low, tired. I don't chase dreams. Not anymore. And with that he turned away, leaving her standing alone in the garage that smelled like failure, hope, and something that might still catch fire. The knock wasn't loud, just 3 dull thuds against the garage door, firm, measured, like the man on the other side wasn't in a hurry because he already knew the answer. Gabe wiped his hands on a rag that hadn't been cleaned since last winter and walked toward the sound, boots dragging against the concrete. He knew who it was before he slid the door halfway open. Tom Richards stood in the morning light, clipboard in hand, khakis too pressed for someone who claimed he understood hard times. His truck idled behind him, a glossy new Ford that still smelled like showroom polish and tax breaks. Morning, Tom said, not smiling. Don't suppose this is a social call, Gabe replied. Tom handed him the clipboard without flinching. You're 3 months behind, Gabe. This isn't me being cold. This is paperwork doing what it does. Gabe looked down at the form, eyes skimming past words he already knew. Delinquency, breach of lease, final notice. A yellow sticker was tucked into the back, big, bold, and hard to peel once it stuck. I told you I needed time, Gabe muttered. And I gave it, Tom said, arms crossed now. But your time ran out last month." Behind them, the garage door creaked as Alex stepped into view. She didn't speak, just hovered near the workbench, watching the scene unfold like it was happening through a pane of glass. Gabe signed nothing, just handed the clipboard back. "I'll find a way." "You've got 7 days to prove it," Tom said. "After that, the county gets involved." He peeled the notice free and slapped it on the door, centered, deliberate. It clung there, fluorescent against the rusted metal, like it was marking something condemned. Tom nodded once and walked back to his truck, never once looking back. Gabe stood there, hands clenched at his sides, breath shallow like he'd just taken a punch to the ribs. When he turned, he saw Alex still watching him. And for the first time since she arrived, he didn't feel like the one offering shelter. He felt exposed, and very, very close to losing everything. He didn't touch it often, not because it was delicate, but because some things held too much of you to be looked at straight. The tarp came off slow, the dry rustle of it louder than expected in the stillness of the garage. Dust swirled up, catching in the light, bleeding through the high window. The car underneath had no make, no model. It was his, built from memory, from rage, from every part of him that couldn't be spoken, welded frame by frame in the years after his father died, after the last contract fell through, after the last maybe next season turned to silence. It had been his moonshot, his defiance. And now it was just the only thing left, with value. He ran a hand along the hood. The paint had dulled, but the lines still held grace. Low, wide stance, rear-weighted split intake design. The engine wasn't a beast, it was a whisper with teeth. One he'd tuned over thousands of hours. Every wire, every bolt, every curve of it was carved from the pieces of other people's dreams and stitched together by a man who no longer believed in his own. He opened the hood and started the disassembly. The socket wrench fit like a prayer between his fingers. One bolt, then another. By the time Alex walked in, half the front end was gone, radiator drained, manifold off, the engine block exposed like bone under skin. She didn't speak at first, just leaned in the doorway and watched him strip it bare. "Don't," she said quietly. He didn't look at her. "It's the only thing I've got left worth anything." "You've got something that runs." "I've got something that's mine," he snapped, setting a fuel line aside like it was made of glass. "And if selling it keeps the lights on for one more month, then it's doing more good now than it ever did sitting under a tarp." Alex stepped forward. "This car is you, Gabe." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "Then maybe it's time I stopped pretending that's a good thing." She opened her mouth, closed it again. He didn't stop working. Some sacrifices feel like surrender, others feel like survival. The air in the office was thick with the scent of dust and machine oil. Alex paced between the scarred desk and the cracked vinyl chair, phone pressed tight to her ear. The door closed behind her. Gabe was still in the garage bay, pulling the heart out of the only car he ever believed in. She couldn't watch any more. The call connected on the third ring. "Rena." Her voice was groggy, sharp-edged with sleep. "It's midnight here." "I need 10 minutes, Alex said, ignoring the clock, the guilt, the weight. "I found something." A pause, then, "Where are you?" "Nowhere," Alex swallowed. "Somewhere better." Rena didn't push, just waited, the way she always had. Alex paced faster. "I've got a working prototype. A combustion electric hybrid system, fully integrated, low-resistance energy recapture, built out of scrap by a mechanic who doesn't even know he's sitting on a goddamn gold mine." The silence crackled on the line. "I've seen a dozen models on lab floors that don't run half this clean. This one purrs, Rena. It breathes." She stopped pacing, stared out the grimy window into the yard. Gabe's silhouette moved beneath the high lights, shoulders hunched, back turned, still dismantling it. "I need you to set something up," Alex said, voice lower now. "Quiet, private, no leaks, just eyes that know what they're looking at." Another pause, then, "Is this yours, Alex, or his?" Alex's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." Of course it matters. She turned away from the window. Then call it what it is, a second chance. Rena exhaled. I'll pull some strings. If it's as clean as you say, we'll get a room. Alex closed her eyes. Soon. You sure about this? Number not even a little. But the image of Gabe pulling apart his dream with trembling hands was burned into her. Yes, she whispered, because if I don't do something now, they'll never hear his name, and they damn well should. She ended the call before doubt could follow. Outside, the rain had started again, but this time it sounded like momentum. The map of the future started with a grease-stained napkin. Gabe didn't mean to sketch it. It just happened, pen moving without thought, tracing lines and loops as he explained the system again. Slower this time, with Alex watching him like she was memorizing every word. They sat at the workbench, an old flood lamp buzzing overhead, casting shadows across blueprints, receipts, and scrap metal. She pulled her laptop toward her, the screen already open to a spreadsheet, half-built from memory. Her fingers danced across the keys with practiced speed, not just typing, building. She took his scattered brilliance and translated it into numbers, into columns and supply chains and labor breakdowns, not corporate, not sprawling, something small, focused, local. He leaned over, pointing at the napkin. If we can source the salvaged battery cores from the plant up in Calumet, I can retrofit the mount to keep it stable. It won't need a full housing frame, just a reinforced brace, cuts weight. She nodded, eyes flicking between paper and screen. That gives us a 20% cost reduction. We make this modular, stackable parts, interchangeable wiring. We can ship in kits. Kits? He frowned. People will ruin them. They won't. Not if we build the tech to teach itself, and we don't launch wide. We license to rural markets, farms, delivery co-ops, places that need efficiency but can't afford a Tesla with a necktie. Gabe raised an eyebrow. You've thought about this. I've lived this. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried something deeper. I spent 10 years building an empire that didn't leave room for people like you. This time, I'm starting from the ground. He stared at her then, jaw working, something hard softening behind his eyes. The napkin sat between them, full of angles and arrows, crude drawings of systems that could change everything. Beside it, Alex's screen glowed with projections and plans and outlines for a company that didn't exist yet. It wasn't finished, not even close. But the blueprint wasn't just on the table anymore. It was in motion. And for the first time, Gabe didn't look afraid of where it might go. The sky outside the garage had turned the color of old steel, flat, unforgiving. But inside, the world was humming. They'd been at it for hours. Tools scattered across the floor like discarded thoughts, wires looped through fingers, bolts clinking onto concrete. Gabe's sweatshirt was soaked through, not with rain, but sweat. Alex had long since ditched her jacket, sleeves pushed high, hands smudged black to the wrists. Neither of them had spoken much. Words weren't necessary when everything they needed was in the work. The prototype sat at the center of the bay like a creature mid-evolution, stripped, raw, beautiful in its unfinished defiance. The frame was a Frankenstein's patchwork, his craftsmanship and her vision stitched together with borrowed steel and sleepless urgency. The battery housing pulsed with a soft amber glow. The modified combustion system, Gabe's makeshift hybrid, stood exposed like a challenge. "This wire?" she asked, voice raspy. "Fuel calibration," Gabe said without looking. "Left it long on purpose. It's touchy." She adjusted it gently, then stepped back, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "We ready?" He looked at her, then at the mess they'd brought to life. Only one way to find out. They exchanged a breath. Gabe reached for the key. It turned slowly, the kind of deliberate twist that held too much hope for how little they'd slept. The ignition clicked. Once, then silence. Alex's jaw clenched. He tried again. Click, whir. Then a cough. The engine sputtered, wheezed. Lights flickered once, like the whole thing had to remember how to breathe. Gabe kept his hand steady on the key. Another cough, a whine, and then it caught. Rough at first, uneven, but alive. The hybrid system hummed low and unsure, like a voice clearing its throat after years of silence. Gabe stepped back, wide-eyed. Alex let out a half-laugh, half-sob. "Holy hell," she breathed. "It runs." "Barely," he muttered, "but it does." They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, watching something that shouldn't have worked come to life under flickering lights and too much belief. It was imperfect, fragile, but it was enough to prove it was possible. The warehouse had once held cotton, now it held silence. Sunlight filtered through broken panes high above, striping the concrete in sharp beams. Dust hung thick in the air, stirred only by the occasional shuffle of expensive shoes on old floors. Gabe stood near the prototype, palms flat against his jeans, jaw set. The car sat like a secret too long kept, its matte finish dull under the pale light, but its shape sharp, ready. Across from him stood 4 people in tailored suits and hardened expectation. At their center, Leon Kessler, silver hair, impeccable posture, smile like a knife's edge. He hadn't said much since arriving, just observed, eyes flicking from Gabe to the car to Alex, and back. He hadn't spoken her name either, but the way he looked at her said plenty. Alex stood to the side, arms crossed, face unreadable. Her expression was calm, but Gabe could feel it, the tension running under her skin, coiled tight and deep. She hadn't said what it would mean if this didn't work. She didn't have to. Kessler finally stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back. "You're the mechanic." Gabe lifted his chin. "I built it." Kessler looked at the car like it might offend him. From what, scrap and good intentions? Gabe didn't flinch. From necessity, from a system that's been ignored because it doesn't look like something you can trademark. A chuckle rippled through the group, short and dismissive. Kessler turned toward Alex. "You were always good at finding broken things and dressing them up in pitch decks." Alex didn't blink. "This one runs." Gabe moved to the door, slid into the seat, and turned the key. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the engine caught. Clean, smooth. Not showroom perfect, but unmistakably alive. The hybrid purr came low and even, with just enough edge to feel human. The warehouse vibrated with its pulse, quiet but impossible to ignore. Kessler's smirk faltered. Slight, but there. Gabe stepped out, let the engine idle behind him. That's what innovation sounds like when it's not choked by suits and shareholder meetings. Alex met Kessler's stare and smiled for the first time all day. Now imagine what it could sound like at scale. The silence after the pitch was worse than the waiting before it. The engine had cut, the hum echoing off the warehouse walls like it didn't want to leave, like it knew something had shifted. But now the air was still, heavy with calculations and second guesses. Kessler tapped his pen once against the folder in front of him, each click deliberate, like he was setting the tempo of whatever came next. The others whispered behind hands, eyes darting toward Alex, then Gabe, then back to the car like they were triangulating value in real time. "We're intrigued," Kessler finally said. "Clearly, there's something here. It's rough, but with proper oversight, it could scale." Alex nodded slowly. "Oversight in what form?" He opened the folder, slid a stapled packet across the table toward her. "We'd provide capital, infrastructure, marketing, staff. You'd retain title rights to the original prototype, of course, but we'd assume majority control moving forward, direction, manufacturing, branding." Gabe's laugh cut the air. Sharp, uninvited. Alex didn't look at him. Not yet. "You want the whole thing," Gabe said, stepping forward. "You want the soul of it, not just the shell." Kessler smiled like a man used to being misunderstood. "We want to make sure it doesn't get buried under sentiment and poor logistics." Gabe looked to Alex, expecting fire. Instead, he saw something worse. Stillness. She was staring down at the papers, lips pressed thin, fingers unmoving. They're offering more than we asked, she said finally. No, Gabe said, voice quiet but firm. They're offering exactly what they think they can take. Gabe? We built this, he said, on a floor with no heat, eating sandwiches out of foil, with tools held together by duct tape and prayer. And now that it breathes, you want to sell its lungs? Her eyes lifted to his. There was hurt in them. But more than that, conflict. We don't have many options. We've got one, he said. Keep it ours. Kessler folded his hands, watching them like they were a negotiation already done. The offer stands for 72 hours. Then he stood. And just like that, the future became a clock. The garage door slammed harder than it needed to. Alex stood near the workbench, arms crossed, jaw tight, as Gabe paced the floor like the anger needed space to stretch. The offer folder lay open on the table between them, the edges curled slightly from her thumb, pressing too hard. Outside, the wind kicked up dust and dead leaves, but neither of them noticed. The storm was already inside. You didn't even flinch, Gabe said, voice low but sharp, like a knife drawn slow from its sheath. He laid out the terms, and you just sat there. I listened, she snapped. That's what people do when they don't want to torpedo their only chance. Chance at what? Watching them gut the thing we built and sell it back to us dressed in glass and chrome? Alex took a step forward. You think I want that? You think I spent the last 10 years fighting through boardrooms and bottom lines just to hand my name over to Kessler again? Sure looks like it, he said, not yelling, but not holding back either. He speaks in numbers and threats, and you fold like it's a language you still want to be fluent in. She laughed once, bitter. You know what your problem is? You're still playing like this is just about pride, like you can weld your way out of reality. And you're still chasing approval from the very people who tore your name off the damn door. That stopped her cold. The silence after was worse than yelling. Gabe looked away first, like even he couldn't stand what he'd just said. Alex stepped back, breathing hard, like she'd taken a hit she didn't see coming. I'm not the enemy here, she said, quieter now. Then stop acting like the solution's in a spreadsheet. I'm trying to save this, Gabe, but maybe you don't want to build anything bigger because you're afraid it might actually work. She grabbed her coat without another word. The door didn't slam this time. It clicked, soft and final, behind her. Gabe stared at the empty space she left, fists clenched at his sides. And for the first time, the garage didn't feel like shelter. It felt like a cage. The envelope arrived by courier, white, thick, pristine, no smudges, no hand delivery, just wait. Alex sat at the tiny table in the kitchen of the house she hadn't intended to stay in longer than a week. The morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, painting warmth across a room that felt too quiet now. Gabe hadn't come by. Not since the fight. She hadn't expected him to. She stared at the envelope. No return address. Just her name, printed clean across the front in heavy serif letters. She didn't need to open it to know what it was. Inside, the contract was neatly stapled. The first page made it clear. Kessler and Monroe Ventures was prepared to acquire her original design patents and partial rights to the hybrid prototype for a figure that made her stomach twist. 7 figures, bonuses. Signing authority reinstated. Her title would be Chief Technical Officer, not CEO, not anymore. But they'd let her back in the building, back at the table, back under lights that remembered who she used to be. No small-town garage, no rust, no watching a man dismantle his life in slow motion while pretending it wasn't killing him. Just her, alone, again, clean. She took a breath and read every word. The clauses were buried 3 pages in: ownership terms, reallocation of control, manufacturing exclusivity. Her name was there, typed in bold, but Gabe's wasn't. The garage wasn't. The engine, their engine, would be stripped down, rebranded, folded into a product line, sleek, mass-produced, sanitized. There would be no napkin sketches, no cracked workbenches, no second cups of coffee on a foggy morning while watching someone coax brilliance from junk. Her fingers hovered over the signature line. This was the door she'd once begged the universe to reopen. Now it stood wide, waiting. Her pen didn't move. Instead, she reached for her phone, scrolled past missed calls, past Rena's texts, until she landed on the last message Gabe ever sent her. It wasn't long, just a timestamp, coordinates, the place where the prototype was born. Her hand trembled. She closed the folder. She wasn't ready to say no, but she couldn't say yes, not yet. The walls came down quiet, not all at once, just piece by piece. A wrench hung on the pegboard for 17 years came down with a soft clink. A stack of manuals, corners curled and pages smudged with the years, went into a cardboard box marked Keep, though he didn't know why. The oil stains on the floor wouldn't come up, and neither would the ache in his chest. Gabe moved through the garage like someone walking through a home that had already stopped being his. He didn't touch the engine in the corner, didn't look at the bay where the prototype sat covered in tarp. That was yesterday. That was hers now, maybe. Or maybe it was no one's. The final notice sticker had peeled slightly in the heat, one corner flapping like it was trying to leave without him. 7 days had become 3. 3 was about to become 0. He opened the last drawer of the metal desk, the one that always stuck, pulled hard until it gave with a groan. Inside was a mess of receipts, bolts, and paper yellowed from time. He shifted through it absent-mindedly, then paused. Folded between 2 fuel invoices was a sheet, thin and brittle, edges fraying like an old memory. He unfolded it slowly. A sketch. Pencil lines faded but familiar. A car, not a real one, not something built for market or mass appeal. Just an idea. All curve and grit and risk. A machine that moved like it was born to run. In the bottom corner, scribbled in his younger, messier handwriting, "For when I meet someone who believes." Gabe sat down hard on the stool, drawing in one hand, the other braced against his knee. The sound of the garage felt different now, not hollow, not full, just ending. He hadn't thought about that version of himself in years, the one who still believed there could be someone else in the picture, someone who didn't flinch when he talked too fast about torquey curves or how engines could feel like memory if you built them right. He folded the drawing again, slower this time, and tucked it into his back pocket. Maybe some things weren't meant to be packed away. The conference room was everything Alex had run from. Glass walls, polished stone floors, a view of the skyline that framed the city like a trophy case. The chairs were leather, imported, designed to make decisions feel final. At the head of the long table sat Kessler, hands folded, pen gleaming silver against a folder marked with her name. "Whenever you're ready," he said, tone smooth, rehearsed. "We've cleared the language, nothing tricky, just a signature." She stared down at the papers. The numbers were impossible to ignore. 7 figures, full equity buy-in, a title that looked good on a resume, and even better in a press release. It was everything she'd been told to want. Control. Power. Redemption. She reached for the pen. Kessler smiled, just barely. "Back where you belong." Her fingers brushed the barrel, cool against her skin. But then something flickered. Not doubt. Something deeper. Older. She saw Gabe, backlit by a single bulb in that cracked old garage, wiping sweat from his brow with the same rag he used to clean parts. She saw the prototype engine catching its first breath, the sketch in his hands, the way he looked at machines like they were stories, not products. She saw a different table, smaller, covered in blueprints, coffee mugs, engine grease, and the kind of silence you don't fill because you don't need to. She saw what it meant to build something that couldn't be sold because its value wasn't in the profit. It was in the people who made it. Alex stood. Kessler blinked. "Excuse me?" She closed the folder gently. "You don't want the engine. You want the headline." His voice dipped. "Alex Dash. You never asked what I wanted. You just assumed I still needed your validation." She stepped back from the table, heels silent against the tile. "I don't," she said. Then she turned and walked out. She didn't run. She didn't look back. And when the elevator doors slid shut behind her, she didn't feel like someone walking away. She felt like someone finally choosing where to begin. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the gravel when she pulled up. No lights on in the garage, no open door, just the wind moving through dry grass and the dull clang of a shutter tapping in the breeze. Alex stepped out of the truck, boots crunching softly, careful not to stir too much dust. He was there, back against the garage wall, legs stretched out, a box of old tools beside him, half-packed, like even they didn't believe he was leaving. His head was down, elbows on his knees, hands stained with oil he hadn't bothered to scrub off. She didn't call his name. She just walked to him, slow, quiet. He didn't look up. She stood there for a second, then reached into her jacket and pulled out the envelope. Not crisp anymore. She'd folded it too many times, held it in her hand too long during the elevator ride down, fingers twitching like the paper could tell her what the right decision was. "I bought the shop," she said. Gabe's head lifted, slow, eyes tired, guarded. She dropped the envelope in the dirt beside him, then added the keys, clean, new, no fob, just brass and promise. "Titles in both our names." He blinked once, slow and steady, like her words needed time to land. "You walked," he said. "I did," and came back. She nodded. Silence stretched between them. He looked down at the keys, then up at her. "You didn't have to do this." "I know." His jaw clenched, eyes flicking to the peeling garage door, the half-empty shelves, the tarp still covering the prototype they'd tried so hard to build into something permanent. "You sure?" he asked. She crouched down beside him, the dust clinging to her knees. "I could have signed, taken the money, gone back to everything I used to be." "And?" She met his eyes. "It wasn't enough." He didn't smile, not fully. But something inside him shifted, the kind of shift you feel deep, like an engine turning over after a long, cold season. He picked up the keys, didn't say thank you, just stood, and let her stand beside him. The new sign went up just after dawn. Gabe held the ladder steady while Alex fastened the last bolt, her hands moving with practiced precision, hair tied back, eyes narrowed against the rising sun. The sign gleamed softly in the morning light, brushed steel, matte black lettering that caught shadows just right. No flourish, no gimmicks, just the name they landed on sometime between midnight coffee and a blueprint covered in engine grease. Steel and Rain, performance restored. Simple, true. The camera crew showed up late, of course, a van with the station logo half-faded, a young anchor in 2 clean boots, and a cameraman who squinted at everything like the dust might bite. Gabe tried not to flinch when they pulled into the gravel lot, tried harder not to tug at his shirt or wipe his hands on jeans that wouldn't be clean no matter how many times he scrubbed them. Alex, on the other hand, looked like she belonged here, not like she was pretending, not like she was selling anything, just standing with arms crossed, waiting for the questions. "So," the anchor started, microphone already live, "you're really opening a high-tech performance shop here? In this town?" Alex smiled. Not wide. Just enough. "Innovation doesn't need a zip code." Gabe said nothing. Just let her talk. Let her speak the language he never wanted to learn. Press, launch, strategy. But when she gestured toward the prototype behind the bay doors, half covered in a new tarp, she turned to him. "He built the heart of it," she said. And for a moment, the cameras didn't matter. The interview passed in a blur of lighting checks and sound bites, but the moment after, the one where the van pulled away and quiet returned, that's the one that stuck. Gabe looked at the sign again. Steel and Rain. The name felt like all the years that came before, and the storm that cracked him open, the softness of her return, the steel of what they'd built. He stepped into the garage, fired up the engine, and this time it roared for the world to hear. The prototype rolled smooth along the back road, humming low and steady, the sound barely louder than the breeze slipping through the open windows. The town was behind them now, just a soft blur of rooftops, telephone wires, and memories left on porches. Ahead, The road curved out toward the hills, where asphalt gave way to gravel and the sky opened up like it had nothing left to prove. Gabe kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift like he couldn't quite let go, even though everything underneath him was working exactly as it should. He hadn't driven it much. Not since the launch. Not since the cameras and handshakes and the sudden realization that this thing, their thing, was no longer just theirs. Alex sat beside him, quiet. Her hair was loose today, catching sunlight, her boots propped on the dash in a way that made it clear she wasn't thinking about image or posture or press quotes, just being, just here. They passed the old feed store, long closed, and the field with the rusted tractor still half sunk in mud from last spring's flood. The world hadn't changed, but they had. Gabe eased the car onto a shoulder where the fence had long since collapsed, killed the engine. For a while neither of them said anything. The wind moved through the trees, low and warm, like it knew how to carry quiet without breaking it. Then he looked at her. Really looked. "You drive," he said. She turned to him, brows lifted. "You sure?" He nodded. "Built it for both of us. Might as well see what it can really do." She smiled then, slow, unguarded, the kind that carried old battles and new beginnings all in one look. "No," she said. "We both do." She reached for the gear shift, and he placed his hand beside hers. Together they brought the engine back to life. The tires kissed pavement, and the car surged forward. Not fast, not reckless, just sure. And out there, at the edge of what used to be the end of everything, they drove into whatever was next, together.